My mom said I was faking it. Then my heart stopped in the school hallway. The notification appeared on my Apple Watch. Hey Reddit, my mom dismissed my heart condition as anxiety, then I collapsed and died in front of 200 students. What followed was a legal nightmare that destroyed her career and our family. Here's how it went down. So I'm, 16 male, sitting in first period calculus when my Apple Watch buzzes for the 14th time that morning. Mrs. Peterson is explaining derivatives while I'm staring at this notification that makes my stomach drop. Irregular heart rhythm detected. It is recommended you contact your doctor. The watch had been going nuts for 3 days straight. High heart rate 189 beats per minute. Low heart rate 54 beats per minute. Irregular rhythm detected. The numbers jumped around like my heart couldn't decide what it was supposed to be doing. I pressed my palm against my chest and felt it hammering, then stuttering, then racing again. Something was definitely wrong, but I'd convinced myself it was just stress. College applications were due. AP exams were coming up. Senior year was kicking my butt in every possible way. The watch was probably overreacting to normal teenage anxiety, right? Except the chest tightness had started before I'd even noticed the watch warnings. That weird compressed feeling like someone had wrapped rubber bands around my ribcage. And the dizziness when I stood up too fast. And that terrifying flip-flop thing my heart did every few minutes that made me catch my breath. By lunch, my watch had logged 17 irregular rhythm notifications. I sat in the cafeteria with my best friend Riley, pushing food around my tray while she talked about her chemistry lab disaster. Every few minutes, my heart would do that stuttering thing, and I'd have to stop and breathe. Riley noticed me rubbing my chest. You okay? You look really pale. I showed her my watch. The heart rate graph looked like a seismograph during an earthquake, spiking and plummeting in jagged peaks that made no sense. Her eyes went wide. Dude, that's not normal. You need to see the nurse. Here's where things get complicated. The school nurse? That was my mom? Yeah. My mother worked as the nurse at my high school. Had been for 8 years. Most kids thought it was convenient having your mom work at school. Free pass to the nurse's office, someone looking out for you, that kind of thing. Reality was more complicated. Mom had this thing about not showing favoritism. She bent over backwards to prove she wasn't giving me special treatment, which meant she was actually harder on me than other students. When I knocked on her office door that day, she was typing on her computer and didn't bother looking up. Come in! I sat in the plastic chair across from her desk and waited while she finished whatever was more important than her son seeking medical attention. Finally, she turned toward me with this expression like I'd already wasted enough of her time. What's the problem? I held out my wrist, showing her the watch displaying my current heart rate of 178. I've been getting these warnings for 3 days. My heart rate keeps jumping everywhere, and my chest feels tight. She glanced at the watch for maybe 2 seconds before leaning back in her chair. Smartwatches aren't medical devices. They're designed to make anxious teenagers panic over nothing. But Mom, it's Nurse Williams during school hours, she cut me off. That was her rule. At school, I had to call her by her professional title like any other student. I pulled up the health app on my phone, showing her the data from the past 72 hours. Dozens of irregular rhythm notifications. Heart rate recordings that looked nothing like the steady patterns from previous months. Look at this. Something's definitely wrong. It never did this before. She barely glanced at the screen before waving her hand dismissively. Those devices have a huge false positive rate. They're basically expensive anxiety generators. Every kid comes in here thinking they're having a heart attack because their watch told them so. My chest tightened more. Whether from actual cardiac distress or frustration, I couldn't tell. My chest really hurts though, and I feel dizzy when I stand up. She typed something into her computer, probably noting that her own son was wasting her time. That's anxiety. Classic presentation. You're stressed about college applications probably, or girlfriend problems. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand she actually examine me, take my pulse manually, listen to my heart with a stethoscope, do literally anything besides dismiss me because I was a teenager with a smartwatch. But this was my mom. I'd been raised to trust her judgment, to believe she knew what she was talking about. She was a medical professional with 18 years of nursing experience. Can you at least check my blood pressure? Just to make sure? Mom sighed like I'd asked her to perform open heart surgery. She grabbed the blood pressure cuff and wrapped it around my arm with unnecessary force, pumping it up while staring at the wall clock like she was calculating how much time I was stealing from her day. The cuff deflated. 120/75. Perfectly normal. See? You're fine. You've worked yourself into such a state that you've convinced yourself something's wrong when there's absolutely nothing wrong. She turned back to her computer. Conversation over. I sat there for another moment, feeling stupid and dismissed and scared all at once. But what if it's not anxiety? What if something really is wrong? Now she looked actually annoyed that I wasn't accepting her diagnosis and leaving. Listen, I've been a school nurse for 18 years. I see kids every single day who think they're dying because they felt their heartbeat or got a headache or saw something on the internet. 99% of the time, it's nothing. She stood up, clearly done with me. You're 16 years old. 16-year-olds don't have heart problems. They have anxiety problems. Stop obsessing over your watch, stop Googling symptoms, and go back to class. I walked out feeling worse than when I went in. The tightness in my chest hadn't gone away. My watch buzzed again. Irregular rhythm detected. I silenced the notification and headed to AP English. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was just anxious. She was the medical professional. She'd done this for 18 years. Surely she knew better than a scared teenager with a smartphone. Except the symptoms had started before the watch warnings. The chest tightness came first, then the dizziness. Then I checked my watch and saw the concerning data, but Mom said I was fine, so I tried to be fine. Fourth period was world history with Mr. Hayes, who had a strict policy against phones or smartwatches being visible during class. I kept my watch face covered by my sleeve, but I could still feel it buzzing against my wrist with notifications I wasn't allowed to check. The room felt too hot. My collar felt too tight. I loosened my tie and unbuttoned the top button, trying to breathe deeper, but the pressure in my chest just kept building. Mr. Hayes was talking about the Treaty of Versailles when my vision started doing this weird tunnel thing, like I was looking through a paper towel tube. I gripped the edge of my desk, trying to ground myself, telling myself this was just anxiety like Mom said. Anxiety couldn't actually hurt you. It just felt scary. I needed to calm down and breathe, except breathing was getting harder. Each inhale felt shallow, insufficient, like my lungs couldn't quite expand all the way. My heart was hammering now, fast and irregular, and I could feel it in my throat, in my temples, in my chest. Tyler, the kid sitting next to me, leaned over and whispered, "Dude, you okay? You look really pale." I tried to respond but couldn't get words out. The room was spinning. My watch buzzed again. I could feel it through my sleeve, but I couldn't focus enough to check what it was saying. Then everything went sideways. The last thing I remember clearly is thinking I needed to get to Mom's office. She'd know what to do. Then my vision went completely black, and I felt myself falling forward out of my chair. What happened next, I only know from witness accounts and the video that went viral. Apparently, I hit the floor hard, started seizing. Tyler jumped up and ran for help while other students backed away, scared and confused. Some kid pulled out their phone and started filming, because of course they did. Mr. Hayes rushed over, rolled me onto my side, and called the office on the classroom phone. "I need the nurse in room 214 immediately." Student collapsed. Mom arrived maybe 90 seconds later. By then I'd stopped seizing but wasn't responsive. She checked my pulse and I watched her face go white in the footage. She couldn't find a pulse. My heart had stopped. Mom started CPR immediately while Mr. Hayes called 911. She did chest compressions while someone ran to get the school's AED. The whole time, she's yelling at students to back up, give space, stop filming. But they didn't stop filming. The video shows Mom doing compressions on her own son, her professional mask cracking as she realizes what's happening. Someone asks if I'm going to die and she screams at them to shut up. The AED arrived. She attached the pads, following the automated instructions with shaking hands. The machine analyzed my rhythm and delivered a shock. My body jerked off the floor. Still no pulse. Another round of compressions. Another shock. Nothing. By the time the paramedics arrived, 4 minutes after the initial call, Mom was crying while doing chest compressions on her 16-year-old son, who she'd dismissed as anxious 2 hours earlier. The paramedics took over. They had to physically pull her away so they could work. They got an IV started, pushed medications, shocked me again. On the 5th shock, my heart restarted. I was loaded into the ambulance still unconscious. Mom rode with me, holding my hand, covered in her son's sweat from the CPR she'd performed for 6 straight minutes. The video hit social media within minutes. Student goes into cardiac arrest at school. It went viral fast. Millions of views. Comments ranging from sympathetic to cruel. Debates about whether filming medical emergencies was ethical. Arguments about whether smartwatches were reliable. And buried in the comments, multiple people pointing out that I'd gone to the nurse's office earlier that same day. That the nurse, my mom, had sent me back to class saying I was fine. I woke up 3 hours later in the ICU at County Hospital. The first thing I noticed was the oxygen mask on my face. The second thing was my dad sitting beside my bed, looking like he'd aged 10 years. "Hey, buddy," he said when he saw my eyes open. "You gave us quite a scare." My mom was standing by the window, staring out at the parking lot. When she heard Dad speak, she turned around. Her face was blotchy from crying, her nurse's scrubs wrinkled and stained. We made eye contact, and she immediately started sobbing. A doctor came in, Dr. Williams, the cardiologist. She explained what had happened. I'd gone into ventricular fibrillation in the middle of history class. My heart had stopped beating effectively, essentially killing me for 6 minutes until Mom's CPR and the AED shocks brought me back. "We ran tests," Dr. Williams continued. "Your EKG shows a pattern consistent with long QT syndrome. It's a genetic cardiac condition that causes irregular heart rhythms. Left untreated, it can cause sudden cardiac arrest." My dad's face went pale. "Genetic? Is that what killed my brother?" Dr. Williams checked my chart. "Your brother died of sudden cardiac arrest? 20 years ago. He was 32. They never figured out why." "Very likely the same condition," Dr. Williams confirmed. "Long QT syndrome runs in families. If your brother had it and passed before genetic testing was widely available, it would have been listed as unexplained sudden death." Mom hadn't moved from her position near the window. She was staring at me like I was a ghost, which technically I had been a few hours ago. Dr. Williams continued explaining the treatment plan. I'd need an implantable cardioverter defibrillator, essentially a small device sewn into my chest that would monitor my heart rhythm and shock me if it detected dangerous patterns. "He's 16, Dad said weakly. "He needs heart surgery? The alternative is risking another cardiac arrest. Next time, there might not be an AED nearby, or someone who knows CPR. The ICD is the best way to prevent sudden death." The surgery was scheduled for 3 days later. I spent those days in the cardiac unit, hooked up to monitors that beeped constantly, while my parents dealt with the aftermath of what had happened. Those 3 days in the hospital were surreal. Nurses came in every few hours to check vitals, adjust medications, explain procedures. Every single one of them knew who I was, the kid whose mom had sent him back to class to die. Some were sympathetic, others were clearly judging Mom. The professional medical community is small, and word travels fast when one of your own screws up this badly. Riley visited every day after school. She'd bring homework I was missing, fill me in on gossip, try to keep things normal. But nothing was normal anymore. I was in a hospital bed with wires attached to my chest, waiting for surgery to implant a machine in my body that might have to restart my heart at any moment. "The video's everywhere," Riley told me on day 2. "It's on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. Everyone's sharing it. Some people are defending your mom, saying she made an honest mistake, but most people are pretty angry." I asked what people at school were saying. She hesitated before answering. "Honestly, it's divided. Some kids are saying she should lose her license. Others are saying people are being too harsh, that she didn't mean for this to happen. Tyler feels really guilty about not doing more when you first started looking sick in class." Tyler hadn't done anything wrong. Neither had Mr. Hayes. Neither had anyone except Mom, who dismissed my symptoms without performing basic medical assessment. The school district put Mom on immediate administrative leave pending an investigation. The viral video had made it impossible to ignore. Parents were calling, demanding to know how a student could die at school after the nurse had cleared him as healthy just hours earlier. The local news picked up the story. School nurse dismisses student's heart condition. He collapses hours later. They interviewed the student who'd filmed the video, some sophomore I'd never spoken to, who was clearly enjoying his 15 minutes of fame. They talked to Mr. Hayes, who described finding me seizing on his classroom floor. They showed B-roll of the school, of an ambulance pulling away with lights flashing, of Mom's empty office with the door closed. My mom became the villain of the story overnight. The negligent nurse who'd ignored warning signs, who'd dismissed her own son's pleas for help, who'd sent him back to class to die because she was too proud to admit she might be wrong. Social media was brutal. People who'd never met Mom were calling her incompetent, negligent, dangerous. Some comments went further, suggesting she deliberately ignored my symptoms because she resented working at the same school where her son attended. Others theorized she had something against me personally, that this was some twisted form of abuse. None of that was true. The thing is, she hadn't meant for any of this to happen. She genuinely believed I was fine, that the smartwatch was overreacting. That teenage anxiety was the logical explanation for elevated heart rate and chest tightness in a stressed-out high school senior. She'd made a professional judgment call based on 18 years of experience, telling her that healthy teenagers don't have sudden cardiac arrest, that smartwatches generate false alarms, that the most common explanation for elevated heart rate in a 16-year-old is anxiety, not a genetic cardiac condition. But intention doesn't matter when the outcome is your kid's heart stopping in a hallway full of witnesses who filmed the whole thing. Dad barely left my hospital room during those 3 days. He'd pull the chair right up next to my bed and just sit there, sometimes talking, sometimes silent. I could tell he was processing everything. His brother's death 20 years ago suddenly making sense. The realization that he'd almost lost me to the same condition. The growing anger at Mom for not taking my symptoms seriously. Mom tried to visit on day 2. Dad told her to leave. They had a screaming match in the hallway that nurses had to break up. Hospital security was called. It was humiliating. That night, after Mom had left and Dad had gone home to shower and change clothes, I lay in that hospital bed thinking about how completely my life had changed in 48 hours. 2 days ago, I was a normal high school senior, worried about college applications and AP exams. Now I was a cardiac patient waiting for surgery. My family was imploding, and millions of people had watched me die on camera. The surgery went fine, technically. Dr. Sullivan, the cardiac surgeon, implanted the ICD below my left collarbone. It's about the size of a small pager, tucked under the skin with wires running through my veins directly into my heart chambers. Recovery hurt like hell. Not just physically, though having your chest cut open and a foreign object sewn into your body is no joke, but emotionally. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw the surgical scar, a 4-inch line below my collarbone that would never go away. Every time I moved wrong, I felt the device shift under my skin, a constant reminder that my body was broken and needed a machine to keep me alive. The first time I felt the ICD, really felt it as a distinct object inside my chest. I had a panic attack. Nurses had to calm me down, remind me this was normal, that I'd get used to the sensation. But how do you get used to feeling a machine inside your own body? I was 16 years old with a defibrillator in my chest that might have to shock my heart back to life at any moment. The doctors explained that if I went into ventricular fibrillation again, the device would detect it within seconds and deliver an electrical shock to restore normal rhythm. They made it sound routine, like this was no big deal. But it was a big deal. It was a massive deal. Every time my heart beat differently, skipped, fluttered, raced, I wondered if this was it, if the ICD was about to fire. They told me the shock would feel like being kicked in the chest by a horse, that I'd probably black out briefly from the pain, that I should try not to worry about it, because stress could trigger the very arrhythmias the device was designed to correct. Great. Don't stress about the machine in your chest that might electrocute you at any moment. Super helpful advice. The family dynamic was completely destroyed. Dad was consumed with rage at Mom for not taking my symptoms seriously. Mom was drowning in guilt and professional consequences that were multiplying daily. And I was caught in the middle, alive but traumatized, trying to recover from dying while my parents' marriage disintegrated around me. Dad moved into the guest room the day I came home from the hospital. They barely spoke except when absolutely necessary, passing information about my medication schedule, coordinating rides to follow-up appointments, discussing practical matters in clipped professional tones that made it clear they could barely stand to be in the same room together. The house felt like a funeral home, quiet, tense, suffocating. I'd hear Mom crying in her bedroom at night. I'd find Dad sitting alone in the dark living room at 2 a.m., just staring at nothing. The weight of what had happened, what had almost happened, sat on all of us like a physical presence. Mom tried apologizing, multiple times. She'd come to my room, sit on the edge of my bed, and break down crying, saying she was sorry, that she'd made a terrible mistake, that she'd never forgive herself, that she'd do anything to go back and change what happened. I didn't know what to say. What do you say to your mother when her professional negligence almost killed you? When her need to prove she wasn't showing favoritism nearly ended your life? Part of me understood. She'd made a judgment call that turned out to be catastrophically wrong. Medical professionals make decisions based on probabilities, and the probability of a healthy-seeming 16-year-old having undiagnosed long QT syndrome is extremely low. She'd bet on the common explanation and lost. But part of me was furious that she'd dismissed me so easily, that she'd looked at documented smartwatch data showing irregular heart rhythms and decided it was nothing without performing basic assessment, that she'd sent her own son back to class when he was telling her something was seriously wrong. Mostly, I was just numb. Processing what had happened required energy I didn't have. I was recovering from cardiac arrest and surgery. I was dealing with new medications that made me tired and foggy. I was trying to catch up on schoolwork I'd missed. I didn't have capacity left over for complex emotional processing of my relationship with my mother. So I just existed, took my pills, Went to follow-up appointments. Let dad drive me places because I wasn't cleared to drive yet. Answered mom's apologies with non-committal okay, or I know, or just silence. The school district completed their investigation faster than anyone expected. Usually these things drag on for months. But the viral video and public pressure accelerated the timeline. 3 weeks after I was released from the hospital, they released their findings. The investigative report was absolutely damning. Mom had failed to perform basic medical assessment on a patient presenting with cardiac symptoms. She'd dismissed documented smartwatch data without proper evaluation or verification. She'd sent me back to class without even checking my pulse manually or listening to my heart with a stethoscope. Basic nursing interventions that any first-year nursing student would know to perform. The report also highlighted systemic issues with the school's medical protocols. The nurse's office lacked adequate cardiac monitoring equipment. There was no clear protocol for when to call 911 versus handling situations in-house. Staff training on emergency medical situations was outdated. Based on these findings, the school district terminated mom's employment effective immediately. 18 years of service, gone. They offered a severance package contingent on her signing an NDA. They wanted to minimize their liability in the inevitable lawsuit. Mom signed it. She didn't have much choice. She needed the money for legal fees that were already piling up. The nursing board opened their own investigation. Her license was suspended pending a hearing. Then Dad hired a lawyer. Elizabeth, everyone called her Beth, specialized in medical malpractice. She came highly recommended by Dr. Williams, who'd apparently worked with her on previous cases where medical negligence had harmed patients. Beth met with us at our house 3 weeks after I got out of the hospital. She was in her early 40s, sharp-dressed, carrying a briefcase full of documents she'd already started compiling. She reviewed the timeline with methodical precision. Every watch notification, every symptom I'd reported, the exact conversation I'd had with Mom in the nurse's office, the collapsed timeline, the hospital records, the viral video. You have an extremely strong case, she told my parents after reviewing everything. Not just against your wife, but against the school district for inadequate medical protocols and supervision. The documentation is exceptional. The smartwatch data, the viral video, the medical records. Everything corroborates a clear pattern of negligence. Mom's face went white. She'd been sitting at the other end of the table looking small and defeated. You're suing me? Dad's jaw was set in that way it gets when he's made up his mind about something and won't be swayed. You almost killed our son through negligence. There have to be consequences. I'm your wife. I'm his mother. This was an accident. An accident would be if you'd done everything right and something still went wrong, Dad said, voice cold. This wasn't an accident. This was you failing to perform basic medical assessment and making assumptions instead of doing your job. Beth stayed professional. I understand this is difficult given the family relationship, but from a legal standpoint, your wife's actions, or lack thereof, meet the legal definition of medical negligence. She had a duty of care, she breached that duty, and that breach directly caused significant harm. That's textbook malpractice. I made a clinical judgment, Mom protested. Nurses make judgment calls every day. I can't order an EKG for every student who comes in feeling anxious. No, Beth agreed. But you can take a manual pulse. You can listen to their heart with a stethoscope. You can ask about family history. You can review documented symptoms without dismissing them out of hand. You did none of those things. The lawsuit was filed 4 weeks after I got out of the hospital. Named defendants, Mom personally, and the school district. Legal claims, medical negligence, professional malpractice, emotional distress, failure to provide adequate medical care, and negligent supervision. The demanded damages were substantial. Medical costs, future medical costs, pain and suffering, emotional distress, punitive damages to deter similar conduct. Beth was going for the throat. The house became an active war zone after that. Mom hired her own lawyer, a defense attorney named Patricia, who specialized in defending medical malpractice cases. She and Dad communicated only through attorneys. Everything went through legal channels. They couldn't even discuss my medication schedule without their lawyers drafting formal correspondence. I was stuck in the middle of a family imploding in slow motion while trying to recover from dying. The stress made my symptoms worse. My heart rate would spike during their arguments. I'd get dizzy standing up when the tension was particularly bad. Dr. Williams adjusted my medications twice because she could see in my cardiac monitoring data how much the family conflict was affecting me. School was brutal when I finally went back 6 weeks post-surgery. I'd missed enough that I was playing catch-up in every subject. But beyond the academic challenges, the social dynamics had completely changed. Everyone knew what had happened. The viral video had been shared and reshared millions of times. Kids who'd never spoken to me before suddenly wanted details about what dying felt like, what the ICD looked like, whether I remembered anything from being dead. Some kids were supportive. Riley and a few others who formed a protective circle around me ran interference when people got too invasive with their questions, helped me catch up on assignments I'd missed. But others were cruel. There were jokes about having a walking defibrillator in the hallways. Someone photoshopped my face onto that scene from Frankenstein, where the monster gets electrocuted to life. It got shared around until a teacher saw it, and kids got suspended. Tyler felt incredibly guilty about not recognizing how serious my condition was when I first started looking sick in his class. He'd apologized multiple times, brought me homework, tried to help in any way he could. I kept telling him he hadn't done anything wrong. He was a teenager in a classroom, not a medical professional. The only person who'd done something wrong was the actual medical professional whose job was recognizing medical emergencies. Walking through the hallways, I felt everyone's eyes on me. Some kids stared at the visible bump of my ICD under my shirt. Others whispered to their friends when I passed. A few came up to tell me they were glad I was okay, or to share their own stories of being dismissed by medical professionals who didn't take them seriously. The school had hired a new nurse, a young guy named Mitchell, who'd apparently been briefed extensively on my case and was terrified I'd drop dead on his watch. He introduced himself during my first day back, assured me his office door was always open if I ever had any concerns whatsoever about my health, gave me his personal cell phone number for emergencies. "I've read your case file," he told me. "What happened to you should never have happened. I want you to know that if you ever feel anything concerning, anything at all, you come straight to me. I don't care if you think it's nothing. I don't care if you're worried about bothering me. You come to me." It was validating having a medical professional finally take my concerns seriously, but it was also kind of sad that it had taken me literally dying for anyone to listen. Classes were harder than they used to be. I couldn't focus the way I used to. My mind kept drifting to my heartbeat, hyper aware of every skip and flutter. The beta blockers made me tired all the time. I'd fall asleep in afternoon classes, my body just shutting down from exhaustion that no amount of caffeine could fight. I couldn't do gym class anymore. Doctor's orders. No physical activity more strenuous than walking. I had a medical note excusing me from any exercise that would elevate my heart rate too much. So I sat in study hall while my former teammates practiced outside the window, running drills I used to do without thinking. I'd been on the cross-country team since freshman year, running varsity since sophomore year. It had been a huge part of my identity. The endurance, the discipline, the team camaraderie, the pure physical joy of pushing your body to its limits. Now that was over. No contact sports, no competitive running, nothing that would stress my damaged heart. Being a runner had been who I was. Now I was the kid with the heart condition, the kid who died in history class, the kid whose mom had screwed up so badly she'd destroyed her own career, the kid everyone had to be careful around because I might drop dead at any moment. The lawsuit process was long and brutal. Depositions where we had to relive everything in excruciating detail. Mom sat across from Dad and me, her lawyer Patricia beside her, while Beth asked questions designed to document every failure in Mom's medical assessment. "Did you perform any physical examination beyond checking blood pressure?" "No." "Did you manually check his pulse?" "No." "Did you listen to his heart with a stethoscope?" "No." "Did you ask about family history of cardiac conditions?" "No." "Did you review the documented smartwatch data he showed you?" I glanced at it. "For how long?" "Maybe 2 seconds." 2 seconds to review data showing multiple irregular heart rhythm notifications? I didn't think it was reliable. "Did you research the reliability of smartwatch cardiac monitoring before dismissing the data?" "No." "Did you consider the possibility that a 16-year-old could have an undiagnosed cardiac condition?" Long pause. "No. I didn't think that was statistically likely. Even though his uncle had died of sudden cardiac arrest at 32? I didn't know about his uncle." "Did you ask about family medical history?" "No." "Why not?" "I didn't think it was relevant." "You didn't think family medical history was relevant to a patient presenting with cardiac symptoms?" Patricia, Mom's lawyer, objected to the phrasing, but the damage was done. Every no was another piece of evidence documenting Mom's failure to provide appropriate care. Beth was merciless, but professional. She wasn't attacking Mom personally. She was systematically documenting medical negligence for the record, building a case so airtight that no jury could ignore it. The worst part of the deposition was watching Mom try to justify decisions she couldn't justify, watching her realize in real time that there was no good explanation for sending me back to class without performing basic assessment, that her judgment had been catastrophically wrong, and now everyone could see it. My deposition was difficult in different ways. Beth asked me to describe in detail what I'd felt in the nurse's office. The chest pain, the dizziness, the fear when Mom dismissed my concerns. She asked me to explain how it felt lying in that classroom floor, dying while students filmed it. How it felt waking up in the ICU with a machine sewn into my chest. She asked me how my relationship with my mother had changed since the cardiac arrest. I had to sit there, on the record, and explain that I barely spoke to the woman who raised me, that I couldn't trust her judgment anymore, that every time I looked at her, I remembered being dismissed and sent back to class to die. Mom cried through my entire testimony. Patricia kept passing her tissues. But Beth didn't let up. This was a legal proceeding, not a family counseling session. The emotion was relevant only insofar as it demonstrated damages. The nursing board hearing happened separately from the civil lawsuit. My parents testified about the genetic condition that had killed Dad's brother 20 years ago, now manifesting in their son. About getting the call that I died in a school hallway. About the emergency surgery to implant a defibrillator in my teenage body. Dad's testimony was particularly powerful. He described his brother James, just 32 when his heart stopped while he was grocery shopping. How the family never got answers about why a healthy young man just dropped dead in the frozen food section. How doctors had listed it as unexplained sudden cardiac arrest. How he'd spent 20 years wondering if it could have been prevented. If someone had caught it, Dad said, voice breaking, my brother would still be alive. If someone had done basic screening, recognized the symptoms, ordered the right tests, but nobody did. And now I almost lost my son the exact same way. My mom testified next. She had to explain to a panel of her professional peers why she'd failed to meet the standard of care expected of a reasonably prudent nurse. Why she'd dismissed documented symptoms without proper evaluation. Why she'd sent her own son back to class without performing basic assessment. Then they played the hospital security footage. Me arriving via ambulance, still in ventricular fibrillation. Paramedics shocking me in the ER. Dr. Williams calling for Dr. Sullivan, ordering tests. The moment I regained consciousness, disoriented and scared. Then the cell phone footage from school. The viral video. Me collapsing, seizing, receiving CPR from my own mother while students filmed. Mom had to sit there and watch herself perform chest compressions on her dying son. Watch herself realize she'd made a catastrophic error in judgment. The board members watched in silence. One of them asked her directly, after watching this footage, do you believe you provided appropriate medical care to this patient? She consulted with her lawyer before answering. I believe I made a reasonable clinical decision based on the information available at the time. The board member's expression hardened. The appropriate answer is no. The board deliberated for 3 hours. Their decision, license revoked, effective immediately. Mom could petition for reinstatement in 5 years, but she'd have to complete additional education and demonstrate she'd remediated the deficiencies that led to her negligent care. The civil trial started in January. I had to miss school to attend, sitting in the courtroom while lawyers argued about my life. Beth's opening statement was devastating. She walked the jury through everything chronologically. The smartwatch warnings, my decision to seek medical help, Mom's dismissal without performing basic assessment, my collapse 20 minutes later, the viral video of my heart stopping, the emergency surgery to implant the ICD. She showed the jury my scar. Had Dr. Sullivan testify about long QT syndrome and how easily it could have been detected with proper assessment. Mom's lawyer tried to argue that smartwatches aren't reliable medical devices, that any nurse would have made the same judgment call, that this was an unfortunate accident, but not negligence. Beth countered that nurses are taught to perform basic assessment, take vital signs, ask about family history, listen to the patient. Mom had done none of those things. The testimony went on for days. Witnesses describing Mom's dismissive attitude. The school district's risk manager squirming on the stand. Dr. Williams describing how close I'd come to permanent brain damage. Dad broke down on the stand, recounting the moment he got the call that his son had died at school. Mom testified and apologized. Said she'd never forgive herself, that she'd made a terrible mistake, that if she could go back and do things differently, she would. But Beth's cross-examination was brutal. You said your son was just anxious. Is that correct? Yes. Did you consider other possibilities? I thought anxiety was most likely. But you didn't rule out cardiac conditions? I didn't think that was necessary. Your son showed you data from his smartwatch documenting irregular heart rhythms, correct? Yes. You dismissed that data as unreliable, correct? Yes. Despite the fact that smartwatch cardiac monitoring has been validated in multiple peer-reviewed studies? I didn't know that at the time. You've been a nurse for 18 years. Is it your practice to dismiss patient-reported data without verifying it? No. Then why did you dismiss your son's documented symptoms without proper verification? Long pause. I made a mistake. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Verdict. In favor of plaintiff. Compensatory damages against mom. $800,000. Punitive damages against mom. $1.5 million. Punitive damages against school district. $5 million. Total judgment. $7.3 million. Mom sat at the defendant's table and cried. Not quiet tears. Sobbing that echoed through the courtroom. Her lawyer put a hand on her shoulder, but there was nothing to say. The judgment destroyed her financially. She had to declare bankruptcy. The house went into foreclosure. She moved into a tiny apartment across town. Dad and I stayed in the house. He bought out her share as part of the divorce settlement that followed 6 months later. The family I'd grown up with was gone. Mom had lost her career, her marriage, her home, and her son's trust. All because she dismissed my symptoms without proper assessment. 6 months after the trial, Dad launched the James Ashford Foundation for Adolescent Cardiac Awareness, named after his brother, who died of the same condition. The foundation offered free cardiac screening for teenagers and educational programs for school nurses about recognizing cardiac symptoms. They partnered with Apple to study smartwatch cardiac detection accuracy in adolescent populations. Beth joined as legal counsel pro bono. I graduated high school on time, despite everything. College acceptances came in the spring. I chose a university with a strong pre-med program. I decided to become a doctor, the kind who actually listens to patients. My ICD has never had to shock me. The medication keeps my heart stable. I barely notice the device anymore. It's just part of me now. Mom never worked in healthcare again. Last I heard, she's managing a retail store. Her nursing career of 18 years ended with her license revoked and her name synonymous with medical negligence. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true.